Humanity had always been different from the rest of the galaxy. Even before they knew other civilizations existed, their home planet, Earth, was considered one of the most dangerous worlds ever recorded. Storms that could rip cities apart, volcanoes that could darken the skies, oceans filled with predators, diseases that evolved faster than cures. Everything on Earth tried to kill its inhabitants. And yet, humans survived. They adapted, learned, and grew stronger with every challenge. This shaped them into something unique, a species that understood danger better than anyone else, and a species that valued life because they knew how fragile it could be. Across the galaxy they came to be known as Deathworlders. It was a name given with fear, respect, and sometimes curiosity. Most peaceful races could not imagine how humans lived or how they had advanced to spaceflight despite such constant danger. Many even believed humans were naturally violent, because who else could evolve on a world like Earth and still smile, still love, still create art? But that belief was not true. Humans were not dangerous because they wanted to be, they were dangerous because they had to be. They were shaped by fire and survived through strength, but their hearts still leaned toward compassion. For a long time, humans stayed away from the complicated politics of the wider galaxy. They preferred building their own world, helping their own people, and exploring regions far from major conflicts. They did not conquer, and they did not interfere unless they believed it was absolutely necessary. This independence made other species uncertain about them. Some thought humanity was preparing for war. Others believed they were hiding secret technology, and a few hoped humans would remain distant forever. But despite all their caution, humans always kept an ear open to the galaxy. They monitored distress frequencies, channels no one used anymore, channels that carried only static for years. Most species stopped broadcasting SOS signals because they believed no one would come. The galaxy had grown complicated, divided, and sometimes selfish. Each civilization was busy protecting its borders, its economy, and its political power. A random distress signal from a weak species often meant trouble, resource loss, or political risk, so most ignored them. But humanity did not. They remembered their own history, when disasters had trapped entire colonies, when early explorers went missing for months, praying someone would find them. They remembered what it felt like to be small in a vast universe. Maybe that was why humans kept listening. They built a long-range monitoring system across their fleet, able to pick up impulses from abandoned sectors, forgotten stations, and lost civilizations. Many younger officers wondered why they cared so much about old frequencies, but the older commanders always answered the same way: because someone out there might still need help. It was on a quiet rotation day aboard the human fleet command station, one of their biggest orbital structures, when something unexpected happened. The command center was calm, and most officers were doing routine checks. Technician Aria Grant sat at her console, watching data scroll down her display. It was mostly noise from distant stars and the soft hum of background radiation. She had seen the same patterns for years. Nothing ever changed. But then her monitor flicked once. A single spike appeared. It was small, almost too small to notice. Most people would have ignored it. But Aria leaned closer, adjusting her headset. She thought it might be just another glitch. The station had old equipment in some sectors, and tiny false signals happened all the time. Still, she decided to isolate the spike and analyze it, just to be sure. When she replayed the sound, it was faint, almost like a whisper under heavy static. But something about the rhythm felt deliberate, not natural, not random. She filtered the signal again, pulling away layers of interference. Slowly, a clearer pattern emerged. Aria's heartbeat sped up. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't interference. It was a message, and it was repeating. She quickly flagged her supervisor, and soon a small team gathered around her console. They ran the signal through several decoding programs, and each time the same structured pattern appeared. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, someone whispered, "Is that what I think it is?" They had no doubt anymore. It was an SOS, not a human distress signal, not a pirate code, but an alien emergency signal that had not been used for more than 150 years. Everyone fell silent. This type of SOS code was ancient, belonging to a peaceful species that once asked the whole galaxy to create a shared rescue system. But the idea died long ago, and most civilizations stopped using that signal after political alliances changed. No one expected to hear it again. And yet here it was, weak, broken, desperate. Aria zoomed into the metadata of the signal. What she found shocked her even more. The message was trying to reach any civilization capable of helping, but the frequency suggested it had been ignored by nearly every species it passed. Somehow, out of all the civilizations it bounced across, only humans had their old receivers active. Only humans were still listening. People began discussing the situation in hushed voices. It was clear this message had been broadcasting for a long time before reaching them. The idea that others had heard it and ignored it made the humans uneasy. On Earth, ignoring a distress call was considered one of the greatest moral failures. They didn't know who sent it or what was happening to them, but they felt the urgency inside every broken bit of the transmission. The station commander arrived soon after, demanding a full analysis. As the engineers cleaned up the signal further, More details appeared. Fragmented sentences, panicked voices, a request for rescue, warnings about destruction, and coordinates drifting closer to a dangerous region known for abandoned systems, pirate activity, and old war ruins. There was something else too, something that tightened everyone's chest. The message carried a line repeated 3 times, like the sender wasn't sure anyone would ever hear them. "We are dying. We are innocent. Please, someone hear us." The room went silent again. No one needed orders. They all knew what those words meant. This wasn't a normal distress call. It was the last cry of someone who had nowhere else to turn. The commander ordered something that hadn't been done in decades: an immediate emergency meeting with the human admiralty. Within hours, senior officers gathered, reviewing the signal, examining star maps, and debating what the next step should be. Some argued that humanity should not get involved. This region was dangerous. Whoever attacked the aliens might also target the humans. There were political risks, military risks, and unknown enemies involved. Others believed that turning away would betray everything humans stood for. They reminded everyone of their oldest tradition. No distress call was ever ignored, no matter who sent it. Arya, the technician who discovered the signal, was invited to explain her findings. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke, but her message was clear. The signal wasn't fake, the sender wasn't hostile, and they were running out of time. The room grew heavy with emotion. The admiral finally stood up, placing both hands on the strategy table. He had survived wars others only read about. He had seen loss, fear, and the cost of inaction. His voice was calm but firm. "If a life is calling for help, and we have the power to answer, then we answer." With those words, the debate ended. Orders were issued across the entire human fleet. Hangars opened. Engines powered up. Crews ran to their stations. Medical officers prepared emergency kits. Engineers loaded rescue equipment. Pilots strapped in. A command that had not been spoken for almost a century echoed through the intercoms: "Activate full fleet response." Humanity, the species others feared for their strength, was now moving with a single purpose: to save someone they had never met. Across hundreds of ships, humans felt the same thought. Someone out there was alone and afraid, and they were the only ones who heard the cry. And because they heard it, they would answer. That was who they were. That was who they always had been. Humanity, shaped by danger but guided by empathy, was not going to let anyone die in silence. So the Deathworlder fleet turned toward the stars, ready to find whoever sent the SOS signal, hoping they were not too late. The galaxy had forgotten the meaning of a distress call, but humans had not, and somewhere in the darkness, a faint voice was waiting for them. The days following the discovery of the alien SOS signal were filled with tension and movement inside the human fleet command. Ships were preparing to launch, officers were checking systems, and everyone felt the weight of the situation. But while the fleet prepared, analysts and communications specialists stayed focused on a single goal: understanding the early situation of whoever had sent that desperate message. No one knew yet what kind of species they were, what danger they faced, or why the signal had been ignored by so many civilizations before reaching humans. All they had was a small fragment of the sender's voice, trembling with fear and exhaustion, repeating the same words again and again. That voice pushed everyone forward. Arya Grant, the technician who first noticed the signal, had not slept properly since the discovery. She kept replaying the small parts of the message they had decoded. Each replay felt heavier than the last. The panic in the voice, the trembling breaths, the broken words, it felt like someone was calling from the edge of death. She wanted to know more, to understand what kind of life form was suffering so much. The galaxy was wide, filled with species of all shapes and abilities. Some could withstand vacuum leaks for minutes, some could regenerate from injuries, while others were so fragile that a single cut could be fatal. Which kind was the sender? No one knew. More fragments of audio came through as engineers improved the decoding system. Some fragments had screams in the background, but they were strange, soft, hypergid, not like any predator or warrior race. It made everyone think the same thing. These were not fighters. These were peaceful beings who were being hunted by something far stronger. Another fragment showed a different voice, sounding older, perhaps a leader or elder. They were speaking slowly, as if trying to stay calm while chaos erupted around them. We have lost 3 ships. Families gone. The attackers, no mercy." The audio ended in static. Arya pressed her hand against her mouth when she heard it, tears stinging her eyes. She wasn't the only one. Even the hardened officers listening fell silent, feeling the weight of suffering they could barely understand. The next discovery came from the astrophysics team. They managed to trace the exact origin of the signal. It came from a cluster of systems known as the Nearth Drift. This region had a dark reputation. Long ago, small colonies lived there, but many were abandoned after pirates, rogue AI groups, and leftover war machines from ancient conflicts took control. No organized government existed there anymore. It was unregulated, dangerous, and filled with enemies who targeted weak species for profit or survival. Many maps marked the area with red warnings: "Enter at your own risk." The human officers knew immediately what that meant. Whoever had sent the SOS was trapped in a place where no one else would come for them, not because they couldn't, but because they were afraid. The humans gathered around a large holographic map of the region. It projected stars, nebula, clouds, debris fields, known pirate routes, and reports of hostile activity. Every few minutes, the map flickered as new data was added. The room felt cold, as if the calculations were measuring the distance between hope and disaster. One captain pointed at a drifting asteroid belt. This area is full of old mines and weapon debris. Another highlighted a narrow passage, ambush zone. Anyone passing through would be shot from both sides. A third pointed at the coordinates where the message came from. If they're here, they're running. They can't stay still. The stationary ship would have already been destroyed. They all understood the situation now. The survivors were not just lost. They were fleeing. Worse, their engines sounded damaged. If they slowed down, they would be caught. If they kept moving, they would run out of fuel or crash into something. It was a race they were losing. More fragments of the message revealed the condition of the sender's ship. The surviving vessel seemed to be more likely a transport ship, not built for combat or long-distance travel. The hull was damaged, the life support system was failing, and several compartments were depressurized. There were mentions of injuries, dehydration, and fear of suffocation. Through heavy distortion, the team heard a phrase that twisted everyone's hearts. Children. Some are children. Many officers clenched their fists when they heard that. Humanity had faced enough disasters in their history to know the pain of losing young ones. The idea of a helpless species trying to protect its children from an unknown enemy made the situation unbearable. The biology team tried to determine the species of the survivors, based on the audio tone and breathing patterns. Their voices were soft, melodic, almost fragile. The breathing sounded quick, like small lungs struggling to pull in air. Some scientists suggested they might be a low-gravity species, physically weak but possibly advanced in science or diplomacy. Low-gravity species usually evolved with delicate bones, thin skin, and gentle movements. They relied on community and technology for survival, not physical strength. If that was true, then these aliens were even more vulnerable than humans originally thought. The humans' fear for them grew. A senior linguist joined the team to break down the last clear sentence. "We are innocent." This line repeated in the message many times, as if the sender needed to make it absolutely clear. The linguist analyzed the tone, emotional stress, and rhythm. The conclusion was heartbreaking. The sender wasn't saying they were innocent of a crime, they were begging not to be mistaken for a threat. They were terrified that whoever found them might attack them too. That fear, buried under their trembling voice, revealed the truth. They had lost trust in the galaxy. They were calling for help but fully expecting death. Only someone truly desperate would send such a call. Arya imagined them delicate beings clinging to each other inside a broken ship, hiding in dark corridors, covering injured family members with thin emergency blankets, listening to distant explosions as the enemy chased them. She imagined a mother holding her child close, whispering that rescue would come, even though she herself did not believe it. She imagined the last elder recording the SOS message, speaking into a dying transmitter, hoping someone, anyone, would hear them before their final breath. The image alone made her eyes blur again. Meanwhile, the tactical division studied the attackers' weapons, based on the energy signatures in the background noise of the recording. The blasts were strong, sharp, and relentless. These were not warning shots or attempts to capture. These were extermination strikes. Every piece of evidence indicated the attackers wanted total destruction, not negotiation. That meant the survivors were facing an enemy with no mercy and no reason to stop. The humans needed to know who this enemy was. After analyzing the signature for hours, the tactical team finally recognized it. The weapons belonged to a faction known for cruelty, a group of raiders who targeted unarmed civilizations, selling survivors into slavery or simply wiping them out to steal resources. These raiders were feared by many but rarely challenged by the major powers. They operated in lawless regions like the Nerith Drift where no police force or alliance dared to interfere. And they were notorious for one thing. They never left witnesses that explained everything. That explained the cries for help. That explained the panic in the survivors' voices. That explained why they kept repeating, "We are innocent," terrified that the galaxy would treat them the same way the raiders did. That explained why the SOS kept repeating for so long, because they knew they would die if no one responded. And yet, no one had, except the humans. This truth began to spread through the entire command station. Engineers whispering in hallways, nurses in medical bays, pilots preparing ships all talked about the fragile aliens running from monsters in the dark. Everyone wanted to save them. It didn't matter that they were strangers. It didn't matter that the galaxy feared humans. Right now, someone was dying, and humans had the chance to stop it. Back in the decoding room, Arya and her team finally extracted another long sentence from the signal. The voice sounded weak, almost fading. "We don't know if anyone can hear us, but if you do, please, we have nowhere left to go." The voice cracked. A soft sob followed. Then the message cut into static. Arya closed her eyes and exhaled shakily. For the first time, she whispered to herself, "We hear you." Those words reminded her of humanity's oldest value. You know, one is ever truly alone as long as someone listens. The early situation was now painfully clear. A peaceful, fragile species was on the verge of extinction. They were hunted by a merciless force. They were fleeing in a broken ship with injured survivors and terrified children. Their distress call traveled through dozens of civilizations, yet no one responded. Their final hope now rested with a species they had never met: humans. Known for strength but guided by empathy. That is the fleet prepared to launch. Everyone aboard knew one truth. They were already late. Every second that passed was another second the survivors might not have. The humans were racing against time, distance, and fate. But they were determined. They would not let the early struggles of the survivors end in darkness. They would not let the galaxy ignore their cries anymore. Humanity had heard the call, and humanity would answer. The human fleet had set its course toward the Nearth Drift, but reaching the survivors was not simple. The region ahead was filled with dangerous pirates, abandoned war machines, unstable star debris, and dangerous gravitational pockets. Every map the humans studied warned that entering this region was almost like entering a maze designed to destroy ships. Yet they had no choice. Someone out there was dying, and they were the only ones who heard the call. While the fleet moved, new information slowly came in. Communication specialists managed to extract more fragments from the alien distress signal. Some pieces were clearer than before but still broken, like shattered glass put back together. What they heard made the entire command center quiet. The survivors were sending updates while running for their lives. Their ship was losing power. The temperature inside was dropping, and the attackers were closing in. The raiders chasing them seemed determined to wipe them out completely. It wasn't just a pursuit, it was a hunt. Inside the human flagship, Captain Alara Dern stood before a holographic screen showing the survivors' projected path. It was a zigzag pattern, full of sudden turns and dangerous shortcuts, showing how desperately the aliens were trying to escape. Ilara watched it with tight lips. Each change in direction meant another cry for help, another moment of fear. She knew the survivors did not have the training to navigate such areas. They were simply running wherever they could. Everyone wanted to know what kind of enemy would chase a peaceful species with such cruelty. The Human Intelligence Division analyzed every trace of weapon fire detected in the SOS signal. The results were grim. The attackers were not ordinary raiders. They were the Carrick Vener, a notorious faction known for wiping out small civilizations to sell their planets, resources, or bodies. They were ruthless, disciplined, and frighteningly efficient. Many species feared them, but few dared to fight them. They usually attacked isolated groups, especially those who had no military force to defend themselves. To them, the survivors were easy prey. Humans had faced cruel enemies before. They understood the cold calculation behind such brutality. It made their determination even stronger. But this also made the situation more dangerous. The Carrick Vener were not amateurs. They were predators who expected no resistance. They would not hesitate to attack the human fleet once they saw them. Several officers warned that the raiders might have set traps or beacons to lure rescuers. It didn't matter. Humans had made their decision. They were going. Meanwhile, Aria Grant remained in the communications sector, still trying to clean the signal. She had played the recordings so many times that she felt like she knew the survivors personally. She imagined their shaking voices, the tiny footsteps of frightened children, the quiet whispers of comfort, the prayers spoken in a language no human understood. She felt connected to them, as if the distance between stars had vanished. Another fragment came in, but this one was different. It wasn't panicked. It was exhausted. A small voice whispered, "We can't run much longer. Engines failing. Please." Then there was a long silence, followed by the sound of crying. Arya closed her eyes, her heart clenching painfully. That cry echoed in her mind. This wasn't just another mission. This was a promise: if humans didn't reach them soon, no one else would. The fleet's journey grew more dangerous as they approached the drift. The space ahead looked like a graveyard. Broken starships floated aimlessly. Old mines drifted silently, some still active. Stray energy spikes flickered like lightning in the void. Every few minutes, the sensors picked up unknown signatures. Some were harmless, others were not. But the fleet kept moving, weaving through hazards with practiced precision. Human pilots were known for their fearless skill. Many aliens often wondered how humans could fly through places that seemed impossible to navigate. The truth was simple. Humans had learned long ago that survival required courage and quick thinking. Their instincts, sharpened by generations of danger on Earth, made them excellent navigators in deadly environments. The drift felt like home in a strange way, beautiful and violent at the same time as they went deeper. The survivors' signal suddenly grew stronger. The humans realized they were getting close. But with that closeness came another discovery. The raiders' ships, their signatures appeared on the long-range scanners, surrounding the survivors like wolves circling a wounded animal. The survivors' vessel was near the edge of a large debris field, moving slowly and unevenly. They were clearly struggling. Their engines produced flickering trails that indicated overheating. Their path wobbled, showing the pilot was either injured or losing consciousness. Captain Alara felt a cold wave roll through her chest. If they didn't reach the survivors soon, the raiders would finish the job. She ordered the fleet to increase speed, even though it was risky. The engines roared as the ships surged forward. The danger of collisions and gravitational rips increased, but no one complained. The crew accepted every risk without hesitation. A whole species depended on them. Even one more second could mean the difference between life and death. Then, without warning, the SOS message cut off completely. For a moment, the entire communication deck went silent. It felt like a punch to the stomach. Arya's hands shook. The absence of that desperate signal felt worse than hearing the panic. It felt like the survivors had finally lost hope, or their transmitter had broken, or worse, they were gone. Try again, the commander shouted, his voice cracking. The team immediately began recalibrating, strengthening the receivers, boosting the signal range. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. No one spoke. Some held their breath. Arya's eyes burned from not blinking. Then, suddenly, a faint chirp appeared on the monitor. A heartbeat-like pulse. Weak, fading, but alive. Arya let out a sob of relief, covering her mouth. The survivors were still there, but something else appeared with a recovered pulse, a faint echo of raider communication. The Karakvena were preparing for the final strike. They were aligning weapons. The aliens' ship could not withstand another attack. The humans had run out of time. The rising conflict now was not just emotional but physical. The entire human fleet could feel the pressure building. Tension buzzed through every ship like electricity. Pilots tightened their grips on controls. Engineers monitored engine heat. Gunners prepared for immediate battle. Medics readied emergency rooms. Every human knew exactly what was coming next. There would be no peaceful negotiation. No warning shots. No gentle intervention. They were stepping into a war zone. Inside the human flagship, strategy officers argued over the best approach. One suggested using drones to distract the raiders. Another proposed using an EMP field to disable their weapons. A third said they should break through the debris with brute force to reach the survivors faster. Time was slipping away. The raiders were getting ready to fire. The survivors were drifting closer to the debris field edge, dangerously close to unstable rocks that could crush their ship. Suddenly, the ship trembled. They had entered the densest part of the drift. Alarms sounded. The gravity around them shifted wildly. Pieces of broken metal spun close, scraping the edge of some ships. Still, the fleet did not slow down. The commanding voices on every ship shouted encouragement. Hold course. We're almost there. Arya stared at the coordinates of the survivors. They were so close now. Close enough that she could almost imagine seeing their ship with her own eyes. She imagined the children inside holding hands, the adults trying to stay awake despite exhaustion, listening to every creak of the hull and praying rescue would come before the raiders did. Then, a new sound echoed through the communication room, a trembling whisper. We see them. Lights, please. Don't let them take us. The survivors were not talking about humans. They were talking about the raiders. The Karakvena ships had reached them first. A cold fear spread through the fleet. Captain Alara barked a command, and the fleet increased speed again, pushing engines to the brink of failure. Warning lights turned red across multiple control boards, but no one stopped. That humans were done watching. Now was the time to act. Sensors showed 3 raider ships moving into attack formation. The survivors' vessel was just a tiny spark between them, like a firefly trapped between vultures. Raider weapons powered up. The survivors screamed through the comm channel. Arya covered her ears, but the sound still reached her heart like a knife. That was the moment the rising conflict reached its peak. Because the humans arrived, just as the raiders prepared their final shot. Every ship in the human fleet felt the surge of adrenaline. They had made it. They could save them. But they also understood something else. The raiders were not going to back off. Conflict was now inevitable. Humanity would have to fight. And as the fleet burst through the debris, filled with glowing engines and roaring determination, the galaxy learned a truth it had forgotten when humans answered a distress call. They did not arrive quietly. They arrived like a storm. The pressure around the fleet had been rising for hours, like a storm forming above a silent ocean. Every ship, from the smallest interceptor to the gigantic dreadnoughts, felt it in the air. The crew could sense that something was coming, something heavier than anything they had dealt with before. Even the veterans, the soldiers who had seen a dozen wars and survived impossible battles, were unusually quiet. It was as if the entire fleet was holding its breath. The alien SOS signal had led them across half the known galaxy, following a trail that grew weaker and weaker with each passing hour. But the message remained unchanged, a cry for help filled with fear, pain, and desperation. When the Deathworlder fleet had first picked it up, they thought it was a trap. Their enemies had tried tricks like this before. But as the scientists and linguists worked on decoding the distress call, they discovered that every part of the message was real, raw, and filled with genuine terror. It was not a military deception. It was a call from someone who truly believed they were going to die. Now they had arrived at the edge of a dead system. No sunlight, No planets with life, only darkness and drifting remains of destroyed ships. It looked like someone had wiped out an entire star system, leaving behind nothing but ruins. The sight was so haunting that even the Deathworlder captains, who had seen destruction many times before, felt a strange chill. Commander Rourke stood on the command deck of the flagship, staring at the holographic map that showed the remains scattered across the void. His jaw clenched as he absorbed the details. Most of the wreckage was not human. It belonged to a species they had never seen before, and judging by the damage, these aliens had not gone down without a fight. They fought like hell. One officer whispered, studying the patterns of blast marks, "Whoever did this, they weren't trying to win a battle. They were trying to erase an entire species." Rourke nodded slowly, feeling a weight settle in his chest. He knew this level of brutality. It matched the signature of only one enemy, the Karun, a race known across distant galaxies for their horrifying invasions. They were not conquerors seeking territory. They were harvesters. They consumed entire planets, left systems dry, and moved on without a trace. If the SOS was truly from survivors of a Karun attack, time was almost gone. The fleet scanners searched for any remaining life signs, but the distance, interference, and intense radiation from the battlefield made everything difficult. It was like trying to find a whisper in the middle of a hurricane. Every second was filled with tension. Officers glanced at their screens again and again, hoping for something, anything, that indicated life. Hours passed, and doubts grew. Some wondered if they were already too late. Others worried that the signal they followed might have been a remnant from someone who had already died. But Rourke refused to give up. His instincts told him that someone was still out there, someone who needed them. Then, suddenly, a faint pulse appeared on the long-range scanners. Just one, weak, unstable, almost disappearing as soon as it was detected, but alive. A spark of hope shot through the command deck. "Lock onto that signal," Rourke ordered immediately. "Find the source." The fleet adjusted its formation and moved deeper into the broken system. The wreckage grew thicker, forming a maze of torn metal, drifting bodies, and shattered technology. Pilots had to slow their ships to avoid collisions. Everyone felt uneasy. The silence of the system made it feel like a giant graveyard. As they approached the location of the faint life sign, the signal grew clearer. It was inside a massive, cracked, metallic sphere, a lifeboat of alien origin. The outer surface was burned and punctured. It looked like it should have been destroyed long ago, yet somehow it still held together. The moment they attempted to scan inside it, the lifeboat reacted. Weak defensive shields flickered on, as if the survivor inside was terrified of anyone approaching. "They're scared," one officer murmured. "They're trying to protect themselves." But Rourke knew they had no time to waste. He ordered a boarding team to prepare. The soldiers selected for the mission were some of the most disciplined and calm individuals in the fleet, the kind who knew how to handle fragile situations. They were not going in as warriors. They were going in as rescuers. When the boarding shuttle attached itself to the broken sphere and forced an opening, the soldiers entered to find smoke, debris, and sparks. The lifeboat was failing. They could feel the heat and hear the groaning metal as the interior collapsed. They pushed deeper until they found a chamber where a single figure lay curled inside a protective pod. The alien was small, thin, and badly injured. Its skin had a faint glow. Its breathing was shallow, and it was surrounded by unfamiliar medical devices. The pod around it was cracked, leaking, and seconds away from breaking completely. The soldiers quickly contacted Rourke. "We found them," the team leader said. "But they're not going to last long," Rourke responded without hesitation. "Bring them to the med bay immediately." The team lifted the pod carefully, moving as quickly as possible through the shaking, collapsing lifeboat. They had barely escaped when the entire structure gave out behind them, exploding into pieces. That survivor would have died within minutes if the fleet hadn't arrived when the alien was first brought into the medical bay. The doctors worked in silence and intense focus. They studied the strange anatomy, trying to guess what treatments would help instead of harm. They had no reference, no database, no recorded information about this species. Every decision was a risk. But the doctors of the Deathworlder fleet were used to working in impossible situations. Hours later, the alien stabilized. Rourke watched from behind a transparent barrier as the alien slowly opened its eyes. They were large, glowing faintly, filled with fear and confusion. When the alien saw the humans, it tried to sit up, panicking, but it was too weak. The doctors stepped back to show they meant no harm. Rourke entered the room slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he placed a small translator device on the table, letting the alien see it. Then he activated it, allowing it to analyze the alien's speech patterns. The alien seemed to understand that he was trying to communicate, and after a moment of hesitation, it spoke softly. The translator crackled before producing a shaky English equivalent. "You," answered the call. Rourke nodded. "We heard your SOS. We came as fast as we could." The alien's eyes widened, and a look of disbelief crossed its face. "You came for one?" it asked weakly. "Just one life." Rourke answered immediately. "Yes, one life is enough." The alien stared at him with a mixture of shock and wonder. It seemed impossible to believe that an entire fleet, the infamous Deathworlders, had crossed the galaxy for a single survivor. Its voice trembled as it continued. My people, they all fought. They knew they couldn't win. They sent me away to warn others. They believed someone had to survive, even if it was only one. Rourke felt a surge of respect. This alien was not just a civilian. They were a witness, a messenger, maybe even the last hope of their species. Before he could respond, the fleet alarms blared. Every ship in the fleet detected movement at the edge of the system. Something massive had arrived. The KHARU hundreds of them. The crew froze for a moment, then rushed into action. Officers shouted commands. Pilots ran to their fighters. Engines roared to life. The galaxy's most feared predators had returned to finish what they started. Rourke turned to the alien. You're safe, he said firmly. We won't let them take you. The alien looked at him with fear. They will come for me. They will destroy everything. Rourke's expression hardened. Not while we're here. The fleet formed defensive lines. The largest ships positioned themselves in front of the medical vessel. The smallest fighters prepared to launch in coordinated waves. Lights flashed across the control decks. Energy shields powered up with deep rumbling vibrations. The Karoan fleet emerged slowly from the darkness, giant shadow-like vessels with glowing red cores, moving in perfect silent unity. They were not here to negotiate or threaten. They were here to kill. The Deathworlders had expected danger, but not a full Karoon swarm. The tension grew until it felt like the air itself was vibrating. Officers braced themselves. Pilots gripped their controls. Every soldier knew that the next few minutes would determine whether they lived or died. Rourke gave one final command. Ships prepare for total engagement. The battlefield lit up with the first exchange of fire. The Deathworlder fleet, famous for fighting like demons from the darkest corners of the universe, launched forward with full power. They knew the odds were impossible. They knew the enemy was overwhelming, but turning back was never an option. Not after answering the call. Not with a survivor on board. Not while the Karoon threatened innocent lives. And so the breaking point began, not just for the fleet, but for the entire galaxy, which would remember this moment for generations. The Deathworlders were going to fight, and they were not planning to lose. The moment the first shot was fired, the entire battlefield changed from silent tension to violent chaos. Space lit up with streaks of energy, explosions, and moving shadows as the two fleets collided with terrifying force. The Deathworlders, known across galaxies for their unmatched ferocity, moved like a pack of predators, unleashing everything they had. The Karoon, cold and merciless, advanced with a coordinated precision that looked almost unnatural, as if each of their ships were controlled by a single mind. Commander Rourke stood firm in the center of the command deck, giving rapid orders as information flooded in from every direction. His voice remained calm, even when the enemy outnumbered them 3-1. The crew relied on that calmness. It made them believe they could survive. It made them believe they could win. The Deathworlder fleet's first wave of fighters shot forward at full speed. Weaving between enemy blasts, they moved aggressively, using high-risk maneuvers that no other species dared to try. Many enemy ships exploded from direct hits by torpedoes and rail cannons, but the Karoon were fast learners. After the first wave, their counterstrikes became more accurate, more deadly. Several human fighters went dark, their signals fading into silence. Rourke felt every loss like a stone in his chest, but he couldn't pause. Not now. Inside the medical bay, the rescued alien lay on the recovery bed, trembling as the ship shook again and again from heavy impacts. Every explosion, every vibration carried a message. The battle was getting worse. The alien watched the lights flicker, remembering the destruction of its own people. The Karoon had crushed them with the same terrifying strength. Fear returned like a dark shadow creeping up its spine. A soft voice broke through the fear. It belonged to a young human medic checking the alien's vitals. Despite the danger outside, the medic smiled. "You're safe here," she whispered. "We won't let anything happen to you." Hearing those words made the alien's eyes water. Never before had someone fought this hard for its life. Never before had an entire fleet risked themselves for someone they didn't even know on the bridge. The battle reports were growing worse. The Karoon were pushing harder than expected. Their ships formed a tightening circle around the fleet, attempting to trap them. Rourke recognized the strategy instantly. If the Karoon succeeded, it would be over. "Break the circle," Rourke ordered. "All heavy cruisers, target the center. Focused fire. Don't give them time to adjust." The cruisers responded immediately. Their massive cannons charged and released beams of concentrated energy powerful enough to melt asteroids. The blast tore a gap in the Karoon line, but the enemy quickly sent reinforcements. It became a fight of seconds. Every move mattered. As Rourke watched the battle unfold, something felt wrong. The Karoon were not acting like they usually did. Their attacks were focused on a single goal, reaching the medical ship. Every adjustment they made pushed them closer to its direction. It wasn't random. It wasn't general destruction. They were coming for the survivor. Rourke's fists tightened. He understood now. The Karoon didn't want witnesses. They didn't want anyone to know their next target. The alien they rescued must have seen something important, something the Corone needed to erase. He immediately called the protection unit stationed around the medical bay. No matter what happens, he ordered, that survivor must stay alive. If this ship goes down, you evacuate them first. Yes, sir, they answered. Meanwhile, the battle outside continued to escalate. Enemy vessels started deploying strange, spider-like drones that latched onto human ships and drilled into their hulls. Crews inside could hear the scraping metal like claws tearing into bone. The drones attempted to sabotage engines and weapons from the inside, forcing humans to fight on multiple fronts. Despite everything, the Deathworlders refused to break. They redirected power, rerouted systems manually, repaired stations mid-battle, and continued firing with relentless determination. But even unbreakable spirits have limits. A sudden burst of red energy slammed into the flagship, sending everyone staggering. Alarms blared, panels cracked, sparks flew across the bridge. One of the main engines went offline, causing the ship to tilt at a dangerous angle. Stabilize it, Rourke demanded. We're trying, sir. The hit damaged the secondary thrusters. Rourke grabbed onto the railing as another hit shook the ship. He saw the Karun dreadnought responsible for the attack, an enormous black vessel with glowing red veins. It was charging a second shot, and this one would be fatal. Before Rourke could react, one of the smaller human destroyers moved between them, taking the full blast meant for the flagship. The destroyer exploded instantly, a bright burst of fire spreading across space that the room fell silent for 2 seconds. A ship had just sacrificed itself to save them. Rourke felt the weight of that loss like a punch to the chest. The crew members stared at the explosion, and their grief transformed into something else: controlled, focused anger, the kind that fueled Deathworlders into doing the impossible. Rourke's voice cut through the shock. No more losses. Target that dreadnought. All available firepower. The fleet responded as one. Cannons charged. Missiles locked on. The coordinated strike hit the Karun dreadnought from every angle. It shook violently under the impact, its red veins flickering. Cracks formed along its hull. Then another volley hit, and another, until the dreadnought finally split apart in a massive explosion that lit up the entire battlefield. The crew erupted into cheers, but Rourke stayed focused. He knew this victory changed the rhythm of the battle, but not the outcome yet. Then a sudden scream from the sensor officer froze everyone. Sir, they're activating a planet-killer charged weapon. Rourke's eyes widened. The Karun rarely used such weapons unless they were desperate. A single shot could wipe out half the fleet. The enemy flagship at the far end of the battlefield began to glow with a deadly red light, gathering energy for the blast. If that weapon fired, everything would end. Rourke knew they needed a miracle. He turned to the communications officer. Get me Captain Hale. Captain Hale commanded the fastest assault ship in the fleet, the Ironwind. It was small, incredibly agile, and piloted by a crew known for taking extreme risks. Hale answered immediately, his face fierce and determined. We see it, Hale said before Rourke could speak. We're already moving. Hale, the blast radius doesn't matter. Hale interrupted. We'll stop them. Rourke clenched his jaw. He didn't want to lose more people. But if the Ironwind failed, the entire fleet would die. Hale. Thank you, Rourke said quietly. The Ironwind launched forward at full speed, engines glowing so brightly they looked like fire. The ship dodged enemy fire, weaving through debris and drones, moving faster than anything on the battlefield. Every second brought it closer to the enemy flagship, which was moments away from completing its devastating charge. Inside the medical bay, the alien felt the ship trembling more violently. The medic checked the readings and tried to smile, but her eyes were full of worry. The alien sensed fear in everyone around. It knew something terrible was coming. It tried to sit up, whispering weakly, "Please, save yourselves." The medic shook her head firmly. "No, we're not leaving you." On the bridge, the glowing light around the Karun weapon intensified. They were seconds away from firing. The Ironwind was close, but not close enough. Hale pulled back. Rourke shouted, "You won't make it in time." But the Ironwind didn't slow down. Hale's voice came through the speakers, calm and steady. "We'll make it. Deathworlders don't die quietly." The Ironwind pushed past its safety limits. Metal panels ripped from its sides. The engines screamed, but it kept going. Just as the enemy weapon reached full charge, the Ironwind rammed directly into the Karun flagship's weak point. The explosion was enormous. Light burst across the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, the enemy flagship was gone, and so was the Ironwind. The Karun fleet instantly collapsed into confusion. Without their command ship, they lost coordination. The Deathworlders seized the moment. They surged forward with a united counterattack, destroying enemy vessels one after another. The Karun, now leaderless, tried to retreat, but the Deathworlders didn't let them. Within minutes, the battle was over. Silence returned to the system, a silence filled with both victory and loss. On the bridge, the crew looked exhausted but relieved. Some cried quietly for the fallen, some simply stared at the stars. Rourke closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the battle settle deep inside his heart. But then he remembered the survivor. He rushed to the medical bay. When he entered, he saw the alien sitting up weakly, tears running down its glowing cheeks. "You won," the alien whispered. "You saved me." Rock shook his head. "No," he said softly. "We saved each other." The alien looked confused. "I did nothing. You gave us a reason to fight," Rock replied. "Sometimes that's enough." The alien's eyes shimmered with emotion. For the first time since its people died, it felt hope. The Deathworlders did something no other species had done before. They answered a single SOS call with the full strength of their fleet, and they survived the impossible. But Rourke knew the fight wasn't truly over. The Karun would return someday, and when they did, the galaxy would need to stand together. But for now, the fleet had won. For now, one life had been saved, and for now, the universe would remember the day when Deathworlders proved that even in the darkest corners of space, some beings would risk everything for one cry for help. The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the sound of explosions. The stars looked the same, distant and cold, but the fleet that floated among them was changed forever. Ships drifted slowly as emergency lights flashed across broken hulls. Medical shuttles moved from one vessel to another, carrying the injured, comforting the survivors, and counting the ones who would never return. Victory always felt complicated for Deathworlders. They were proud, but they never forgot the cost. Commander Rourke stood by the observation window on the flagship, staring at the battlefield that had turned into a graveyard of metal and memories. Pieces of destroyed enemy ships floated by like silent ghosts. Among them were fragments of human vessels too, reminders of the brave souls who had sacrificed themselves. He placed a hand on the glass, not because he expected anything from the stars, but because he needed something to steady himself. Battles made him stronger, but losses always made him human. A soft sound behind him broke his thoughts. When he turned, he saw the alien they rescued standing unsteadily in the doorway. Although still weak, it had insisted on walking. The medical team had tried to convince it to rest, but the alien had said it needed to see the commander. Rourke walked toward them and gently guided the alien to a nearby seat. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. They simply looked out the window together, watching the drifting remains of the battle. The alien's eyes reflected sadness, gratitude, and something deeper, something like survivor's guilt. Finally, the alien spoke in a soft, trembling voice. "You lost many, because of me." Rourke shook his head immediately. "We didn't lose people because of you. We lost them because the Karun chose war. It didn't bring danger. You brought purpose." The alien looked down at its hands, glowing faintly in the dim light. "My people believed no one would come for us. We believed we were alone in the galaxy. I don't understand why you risked everything for someone you didn't know." Rourke let out a slow breath because one life matters. One voice can change everything. And because if we ignore someone crying for help, then what kind of beings are we? The alien blinked, struggling to hold back tears. It had never heard anything like that before. In its world, survival had always meant saving many and sacrificing few. But here, among Deathworlders, the rule was different. They believed that even one life was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The days that followed were filled with repairs. Engineers worked day and night, welding broken plates, repairing weapon systems, and replacing destroyed engines. The fleet had taken heavy damage, but Deathworlder ships were tough, built to survive even the harshest battles. The crews worked, with a quiet determination, knowing that everything they did honored those who fell. In between repairs, something unexpected happened. The alien became part of the crew's daily life. At first, it stayed in the medical bay, too weak to move much, but the humans visited often, bringing food, teaching simple words, and telling stories of their home planet. Most of the stories were funny or warm, because the crew didn't want to burden the alien with tales of war. They wanted to show it that humanity was more than fighters. They were explorers, dreamers, thinkers, and protectors. The alien listened carefully, absorbing every detail. It was the last of its kind, or at least it believed so. Yet here it was, being treated not as a specimen or a political tool but as a guest, as a person, as someone who mattered. One day, while walking slowly through a hallway with the help of a medic, the alien heard laughter coming from a group of young pilots repairing a shuttle wing. When one of the pilots noticed the alien, she waved cheerfully. "Hey, want to see something cool?" she asked. The alien hesitated but nodded. The pilot tapped a control panel and the damaged wing unfolded smoothly, revealing a hidden compartment where a small fireproof charm was stored. It looked like a simple metal coin, worn by time. "This was a good luck charm from my grandmother," the pilot explained. "She said it keeps you safe in dangerous places. I've taken it into every battle." The alien stared at the charm, surprised that a human would share something so personal. When the pilot pressed it into the alien's hand, the alien nearly refused. "I cannot take this," it said softly. But the pilot insisted with a smile. "You survived something impossible. You need it now more than I do." Moments like this changed the alien deeply. It had lost everything: its home, its people, its family, yet the Deathworlders treated it as one of their own. The alien had learned about humans through quiet observation in the medical bay. but being among them gave it a new understanding. Humans were strange creatures, fearless, emotional, chaotic, compassionate. They fought like demons but cared like healers. They could argue loudly one minute and risk their lives for each other the next. Their hearts were unpredictable, yet powerful. Weeks passed, and repairs were almost complete. The fleet prepared to leave the dead system behind and return to human territory. The alien felt both relief and fear. It did not know what awaited it in a world full of strangers. It didn't know whether it could build a new life or if it would carry the weight of its lost species forever. One evening, Rourke found the alien standing again at the observation window, looking at the stars. The alien didn't turn when he approached. "I should feel happy," the alien said quietly, "but instead I feel lost." Rourke understood instantly. "Because you survived when others didn't." The alien nodded. "I don't know what to do now. I don't know who I am without my people." Rourke placed a hand gently on its shoulder. "You are someone who lived through something unimaginable, and that isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new one. You carry your people in your memory. You honor them by living." The alien's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't just tears of sadness, they were tears of healing. It felt understood in a way it hadn't expected. As the fleet began the journey back, they transmitted messages to nearby systems, reporting the destruction, requesting reinforcements, and warning everyone about the Karun threat. The galaxy had been too silent for too long, thinking the Karun were a distant legend or an old enemy no longer active. Now people knew the truth. The Karun were back, stronger than ever, and willing to destroy entire civilizations. Because of the rescued alien, the Deathworlders now had proof. And because of the Deathworlders, the alien had hope. When the fleet finally arrived at Earth orbit weeks later, the planet shined below like a glowing jewel full of light, life, and movement. The alien had never seen a world so alive. It pressed its face gently against the glass, mesmerized by oceans, forests, and clouds. "Your home is beautiful," the alien whispered. Rourke smiled. "And now it's yours too, if you want it." The alien turned toward him, shocked. "You would allow me to stay, even though I am different?" Rourke laughed softly. "We're all different. That's what makes the galaxy interesting. You're welcome here." When the alien stepped onto Earth for the first time, it felt warmth on its skin from the sun. Birds flew overhead. Wind rustled through leaves. Children laughed nearby. The alien closed its eyes, letting the sound of life wash over it, and for the first time since its people died, it didn't feel alone. News of the rescue and the battle spread across human space within days. People called the alien a symbol of unity, a reminder that every voice mattered, no matter how far away it came from. Schools told the story of how the Deathworlders had crossed the galaxy for a single SOS signal. Leaders from other planets sent messages of admiration. Even scientists began studying the battle recordings, trying to learn more about the Karun so they could prepare for the future. But the story meant more than warnings. It became a reminder of courage. Children reenacted the battle with toy ships. Artists painted scenes of the Iron Wind's sacrifice. A monument was built to honor the fallen crew, with the alien present at the ceremony. When the alien placed a glowing hand on the memorial stone, a quiet hush fell over the crowd. It whispered words from its own language, honoring both its people and the humans who saved it. The alien eventually became an ambassador not by official title, but by its presence. Whenever it visited schools, young students listened to its stories with wide eyes. Whenever it appeared in public, people greeted it with warmth and curiosity. Over time it learned Earth languages fluently, formed friendships, and even found new purpose working with researchers to warn other species about the Karun. One night, sitting on a hill overlooking the ocean, the alien thought quietly about everything that had happened. If the Deathworlders had ignored its call, the universe would never have known what was coming. If the Iron Wind hadn't sacrificed itself, the entire fleet would have died. If Rourke hadn't believed in saving one life, the alien wouldn't be here to see this new world. The alien realized something important that night. Sometimes the universe changed not because of grand armies or powerful leaders, but because of small acts: one call for help, one decision to answer, one life saved. The alien whispered into the wind, "They saved me, and now I must help save others." The waves carried its words across the shore, gentle and endless. The Deathworlders continued their work in the galaxy, preparing for whatever came next. They would face new threats, new mysteries, new dangers, but they would also carry the memory of the battle that proved their greatest strength wasn't their weapons, it was their heart. And somewhere in the vast universe, the story of the alien SOS signal that triggered a full Deathworlder fleet response became a legend, one that inspired hope, courage, and unity among species that once feared each other. For the alien, the journey had begun with terror and ended with belonging. For the Deathworlders, it had begun with a cry for help and ended with a reminder of who they truly were: a force feared by enemies, a shield for the innocent, and a light in the darkest parts of space.